Yesterday, we began discussing the challenges of part of speech tagging, the principle involved in part of speech tag design, and what kind of challenges one could face when doing part of speech tagging and designing the part of speech tag. Just to remind everybody, part of speech tagging is the first important disambiguation task that takes place on language data. The text contains meaning, but the road to meaning is not smooth. There are many challenges and difficulties to be faced on the way, and part of speech tagging is first such milestone which needs to be crossed. Part of speech tagging is a disambiguation task, because given any word, we would like to first find out what the category of the word is. Languages typically assign multiple lexical categories for a word. For example, the word play in English can be a verb to play. It could also mean a play, which is a game, or could mean a dramatic performance. So, it could be noun or verb. The same thing applies to most languages, where there is category ambiguity for words. So, when we do part of speech tagging, we are essentially solving a disambiguation problem. And what is the clue to the disambiguation? The clue comes from the sentence itself, information on the word, the context in which the word appears. But the key thing to remember at this point is that since part of speech tagging is one of the levels of natural language processing, this is one of the first levels. First, we do morphological analysis, segmentation, etc. on the word, try to extract as much information as possible from the word, and then we find out the category of the word. If there is a question as to why the category should be disambiguated, the reason is that the lexical category can be multiple for a word, and the word's category in a particular sentence comes from the context. Now, in the context, when we do the processing of the sentence, we have to first process word. Okay. So, the word process, the processing of the word is morphological processing, separating the suffix, obtaining the word features. For example, a word like plays can be analyzed in two different ways. It could mean play and plural s, a number of plays, and it could also mean he plays, third person singular number, present tense. So, this analysis needs to be done. When we want to obtain the part of speech tag of the word from the context, we have to look at the words around this particular word, the target word. This gives rise to some fundamental points about part of speech tagging. Let us proceed looking at the slides. So, part of speech tagging sits between morphology and parsing. This is a diagram which shows different levels of processing for natural language data, natural language text. So, first comes morphological processing, as has been explained. A word like khelunga in Hindi will be separated into khelna as the root and unga as the suffix, indicating thereby first person singular number future tense. So, morphological processing obtains this kind of information. Then comes part of speech tagging. Part of speech tagging will produce the categories on the word. Then comes parsing, which obtains the structure of the sentence and divides the sentence into phrases. After that, there is this level of semantics extraction, which obtains the meaning of the sentence in terms of the roles, the semantic roles played by the nouns. So, if we say Ram eats rice with a spoon, then Ram is the agent of eating activity, rice is the object of eating activity, and spoon is the instrument. So, this kind of information is obtained at different layers. Part of speech tagging concentrates on simply identifying the grammatical category of the word. Okay. So, this is to be borne in mind. This has a very well defined task to do, namely identifying the grammatical category. And the only information it can use is the lower level information of morphological processing. It cannot make use of any parsing information, nor can it make use of any semantics extraction. That is because the processing of semantics and parsing comes later. I show here in a circle rules and resources, meaning thereby that all these layers need rules of language constraints, language phenomena. They also need resources like the dictionary or a meaning database or properties of the words and so on. So, this forms again a very important component of the processing, which we will have occasion to discuss. Now, I will just repeat what I said here. At the part of speech tag level, we have to make use of only the contextual information around the word, the morphological processing information. We cannot assume syntactic structure to be available, nor can we assume semantic information to be available. So, this chain of morph, PoS and parse produces a very fundamental and important constraint on what can be done at the part of speech tag level. Okay. So, this is our concern, what can we do at the part of speech tag level. So, because of this sequence, at the level of part of speech tagging, the only information available is the word. Okay. I emphasize again, the only information available is the word, its constituents, that means its suffixes and the morphemes, its properties, lexical properties, and its neighboring words and their properties. So, this picture shows what we mean by context and the word properties. Here is a word sequence W0, W1, W2, Wi, Wi plus 1 up to Wn. There are n words in this window, maybe a sentence. The word of interest is Wi, okay, and the part of speech tag on Wi can be obtained only by information on Wi and around Wi. Okay. This point about around Wi is important, because we cannot assume an extremely long contextual window around Wi. Okay. So, it has to be necessarily limited, because part of speech tagging is only the preliminary level of processing. So, if we proceed further, then we are stating that we cannot assume parsing and semantic processing. Parsing identifies long distance dependencies. It needs part of speech tagging, which must finish earlier. Before parsing, the part of speech tagging must be over. Semantic processing needs parsing and part of speech tagging, which means this again is a much later process. So, therefore, this sort of establishes the fact that part of speech tagging will not be able to make use of parsing and semantic processing. We take examples. We discussed in the last class some examples of the following form. वो लड़का सो रहा है, that boy is sleeping. वो cricket खेल रहा है, he is playing cricket. He plays cricket, he is playing cricket. So, these two sentences were pointed out to be of very similar structure. वो लड़का cricket, both nouns, सो खेल verbal roots, raha hai auxiliary verb indicating present tense, continuous tense. So, these two sentences are very similar, only changes are these noun ladka to cricket and sona to khelna. Now, if we look at the translations, that boy is sleeping. So, wo here is a demonstrative qualifying ladka, a particular boy, and wo here is not a demonstrative, it is a pronoun. It refers to a person which came in the discourse before, a particular noun which came in the discourse before, and this wo refers to this person, therefore, it is a pronoun. So, even though the sentences have very similar structure, this wo is a demonstrative, this wo is a pronoun. So, the fact that wo is demonstrative in the first sentence and pronoun in the second sentence needs deeper level of information. If you think for 2 minutes, why is it that this wo is a demonstrative and this wo is not a demonstrative? It refers to something outside this sentence, outside this context, then you must appreciate that this requires knowledge of the world, this requires knowledge of the language, and is not a simple task. So, this wo, which is demonstrative wo, it refers to Ladka, but this wo, which is a pronoun, it refers to something outside the sentence. Okay. And how we do this disambiguation is a complex task. So, to further establish my point, I would like to say that wo cricket, when we resolve it saying that wo is a pronoun, is not a simple problem. This can be understood by looking at another example. Let us take this sentence, वो क्रिकेट जिसमें भ्रष्टाचार हो हमें नहीं चाहिए. वो क्रिकेट जिसमें भ्रष्टाचार हो हमें नहीं चाहिए. That cricket which has corruption in it is not acceptable to us. Okay. So, this is a sentence which is a longer sentence. It is a complex sentence because it has two verbs, ho in the form of a main verb and chahiye is the other verb. So, it is a complex sentence with two components in it, hame nahi chahiye and wo cricket jisme bhrashtachar ho. So, this wo again has become demonstrative. Okay. This wo is referring to this cricket, it is a demonstrative for this noun, it is a qualifier for this noun, and therefore, it should be detected as demonstrative. Okay. If you compare this with the earlier sentence, वो क्रिकेट खेलता है and वो क्रिकेट जिसमें भ्रष्टाचार हो हमें नहीं चाहिए, these two was have different roles to play, one demonstrative, the other pronoun, even though the same noun cricket appears there. Therefore, it is a complex processing, if I have been able to impress this on you, that this is a complex processing by which we identify the grammatical categories. Okay, and it needs deeper level of processing, it requires semantic information. Proceeding further, syntactic processing also cannot be assumed at the level of part of speech tagging. Syntactic processing means identifying the phrases, the constituents of a long sentence, and how we obtain those segments. It is a structural work, it uncovers the structure contained in the sentence. Syntactic processing also cannot be assumed at the part of speech tag level, because parsing requires PoS tagging. I give here an example sentence which is interesting to analyze. राम का यह बार बार शाम का घर बिना बताए जाना मुझे बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं है. It is a long sentence. Let me read the Hindi sentence again. राम का यह बार बार शाम का घर बिना बताए जाना मुझे बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं है. The English translation is, I do not at all like the fact that Ram goes to Sham's house repeatedly without informing anybody. Okay. Again, I do not at all like the fact that Ram goes to Sham's house repeatedly without informing anybody. So, this is an interesting sentence from the view of part of speech tagging of a particular word which is capitalized here, jana. Jana. Okay. So, if we look at the features of the words, in particular of the proper nouns here, Ram is in genitive form here, Ram ka. Sham also is in genitive form, Sham ka. So, the gloss of the sentence would be Ram genitive, this again and again, Sham genitive, house, any not saying, going, I dative, at all, like, not, weak of. So, this is a grammatical analysis of the words in the sentence, and we have capitalized the word which needs to be disambiguated with respect to part of speech. Now, we look at this jana and say that jana can be verb in infinitive. Okay. So, or it could be a gerundial, verb nominal. Okay. So, let me explain these two terms to you by writing on the paper. The word jana, it can be a verb infinitive, or it could be a verb nominal, also called gerundial. Okay. So, let me give an example to clearly distinguish these two cases. Verb infinitive, वो जाना चाहता है, he wants to go. So, to go is the infinitive and this jana is the infinitive. This is V inf. How about gerundial? How can jana be gerundial? जाना आना लगे रहता है, जाना आना लगे रहता है, going and coming continues. Okay. So, here going is jana, this is the act of going, it is a gerundial or verb nominal. So, here the tag would be, let us say V G N. So, there are these two tags for jana, one is the V infinitive tag or V gerundial tag. Okay. So, jana form is the same, we have to produce the correct tag V G N or V I N F depending on its role in the sentence. So, let us look at the slide again and understand why it is difficult. राम का यह बार बार शाम का घर बिना बताए जाना, here comes jana, we have to produce V inf or V G N verb infinitive or nominal verb or gerundial verb on this particular word. How do we do this? Okay. We look at the next slide and see where is the clue for this disambiguation. The correct clue for disambiguation for jana is Ram ka, and this word group is far apart. Okay. So, you see this jana could be verb infinitive or verb gerundial. This is actually a gerundial because Ram ka jana, Ram's going, this is the translation. Ram's going to Sham's house is not liked by me. So, this is actually going, the gerundial form, and it is gerundial because of Ram ka. So, this clue has to come from Ram ka, which is far away from jana. There are many words 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 words between jana and Ram ka. Okay. And this fact that yah bar bar sham ka ghar bina bataye jana, okay, this particular text segment has to be sort of masked. This particular text segment has to be masked, and the dependency between jana and ramka, the relationship between jana and ramka has to be uncovered to detect that this is a gerundial. So, this kind of long distance dependency can be detected only if this particular structure, yeh bar bar sham ka ghar bina bataye, if this particular structure is masked, okay, it is taken at a different level and ramka and jana are brought together, then only we can identify that this is a gerundial verb, nominal verb. Okay. And this means it requires doing parsing on this sentence, you have to detect the structure. And then finally comes the main sentence, which is mujhe bilkul pasand nahi hai. This shows that one has to take a sentence and peep into the structure of the sentence, identify the segments, and then only this kind of disambiguation is possible. So, this is what is written, this needs parsing, which in turn needs correct tags. Thus, there is a circularity which can be broken only by retaining one of V inf and V n. Okay. So, the point being made here is that in general, in the worst case scenario, it is impossible to identify V inf and V n correctly at the level of part of speech tag, and therefore, there is no point in retaining these two tags, because at the part of speech tag level you cannot do anything to separate them. Okay. So, this takes us to the fundamental principle of part of speech tag set design, which is this: in the tag set do not have tags that are potential competitors and tie between which can be broken only by NLP processes coming after the particular tagging task. Okay. So, this applies to any tag set design. Whenever for annotation we are designing a tag set, we have to bear this principle in mind. If there are potential competitors and the tie between them can be broken only by subsequent NLP processes, which come after this particular annotation task, then there is no point keeping both the competitors together. Only one of them can be resolved. So, this is the fundamental principle of part of speech tag design. So, I hope this particular point is brought home very clearly to you, that part of speech tag design is essentially a labeling problem. Identifying the correct label is the task. This needs disambiguation, and the task cannot make use of any subsequent task which comes after part of speech tagging. So, having looked at the principle of PoS tagging and in general the task of tag set design, we now proceed with discussion of Indian language part of speech tagging. We had started this in the last class. We mentioned that Indian language part of speech tagging is happening under a large scale India wide project called Indian language to Indian language machine translation. Multiple institutes across the country are participating in this. So, it is a consortium of institutes. The part of speech tags are the tags required for Indian language to Indian language machine translation, and therefore, the attempt is to design a pan Indian tag set. A tag set which will be applicable across languages, from languages in the Indo-European family to the Dravidian family to the Sino-Tibetan family in the east. So, let me just make a remark on this particular point, the language groups in India, and I would like to write it down. Language families in India. This is important for any kind of natural language processing in the country. So, mainly in the north, we have Indo-European family. So, important members in this are Hindi, Punjabi, Bengali and so on. Mainly south, we have Dravidian family. The major members in this are Tamil, Telugu, Kannada and Malayalam. All right. There are two languages of interesting behavior These are Marathi and Oriya, and both these have influence of Dravidian. Okay. Primarily they are Indo-Aryan or Indo-European, primarily Indo-European, but Dravidian influence. Okay. So, Marathi and Oriya, being at the border of South India and North India, have influence of Dravidian in them, though they are particularly Indo-European languages. On the northeast, we have the Tibeto-Burman family. Okay. In this Tibeto-Burman family, the prominent members are Bodo, Manipuri, Nagamese, etc. So, these are Tibeto-Burman family, descendant of the larger Sino-Tibetan family. All right. So, this covers the major languages of the country: Indo-European in the north, Dravidian in the south, and Sino-Tibetan or Tibeto-Burman in the northeast. I must mention two interesting cases, two languages which are Khasi and Munda. They are what are called Austro-Asiatic languages. Okay. So, these are the only two languages which belong to this family, and they are the representatives of the Austro-Asiatic family. So, to summarize, there are 4 language families in the country. 2 very large groups are Indo-Aryan, containing mainly the languages of North India. Then we have Dravidian, the important members are the 4 languages from the south. Third important group is the group of languages in the northeast of the country, namely Bodo, Manipuri, Nagamese, etc. There are 2 languages which are interesting cases, Munda and Khasi, they belong to Austroasiatic family. We have also said that Marathi and Oriya are the 2 languages which have influence of Dravidian languages on them, even though they are primarily Indo-European languages. All right. So, what is the relevance of this discussion? The relevance of this discussion is that we have a very diverse set of languages with their complex language phenomena, which need to be resolved whenever we do anything for the machine processing of these languages. So, we cannot, for example, have a part of speech tag set only for Hindi, considering only Hindi language phenomena, and expect thereby that it will work for other languages also. So, other languages have phenomena which are not present in Hindi, and what should we do for part of speech tagging when such phenomena appear in the language. Okay. So, we will take some examples of this, but one example that comes to my mind immediately is the phenomenon of classifiers in Bengali. Okay. So, in Bengali we say chele T, I will write it down, classifier phenomenon in Bangla. So, chele T, this is Bengali script, chele T khelche, the boy is playing. Okay. This T is an interesting language element which has a definite role to play. T is called a classifier, it denotes a particular boy. Okay. So, it can be looked upon as a discourse identifier, it is a discourse particle, and this identifies a particular boy, it is a classifier. So, this phenomenon does not exist in Hindi, okay. And therefore, it if we do not do anything about this classifier, then we are not doing justice to the processing of Bengali language. Okay. So, this particular phenomenon needs to be handled. Therefore, when we consider the pan Indian scenario, all Indian languages, and discuss their part of speech tagging, then all these phenomena have to be taken into account. I would like to give another example. We have remarked that V-inf, verb infinite, and nominal, verb nominal are difficult to distinguish for Hindi. So, the example which was discussed was jana, and we found that it is impossible to distinguish between them Vn and V-inf in the most general case. However, if a language shows a marking on the word itself for this infinitive verb and gerundial verb or nominal verb, then we can retain these 2 tags V-inf and V-in, because they can be resolved from the property of the word. So, Dravidian languages and even Marathi language can arrange for this. So, verb in infinitive form and verb in gerundial or nominal form have different forms, they have completely different forms, okay. And therefore, we can retain the 2 tags for these languages. Even if Hindi does not retain, the other languages like Dravidian and Marathi can retain these tags, okay. And these considerations have to be kept in mind. So, let me summarize this discussion by an important point. The point is that if you are designing part of speech tag for one single language, then it is one task. When we are designing the part of speech tag set for a number of languages with different phenomena coming from different families, then we have to be more discerning and more encompassing with respect to language phenomena. Okay. So, these considerations went into the part of speech tag design, which came from the ILILMT PoS tag designing task. So, this task was to create a part of speech tag set for the purpose of machine translation from one Indian language to another, and this is the website of Sampark, the machine translation system amongst Indian languages. Now, we discussed this yesterday, and just now a point which was made showed that it makes sense to have what is called a hierarchical tag. Okay. We said that vinf and vn will not be distinguishable in Hindi, but they are distinguishable in Marathi and Dravidian languages. So, it makes sense to have a hierarchy. We have a general verb tag which applies across languages, but the subcategories like vinf and vn apply to certain languages and not all. So, this leads us to a hierarchical categorization of tags. We discussed yesterday that there is this general category of noun, and under that we have common noun, proper noun and locative nouns, and this was discussed carefully with emphasis on the last category, which is the interesting case of words like upar, niche, aage, piche, bahar, etc., which can function both as noun and also as postpositions. In case of pronouns and demonstratives, we again saw different categories like personal, reflexive, relative, reciprocal, WH word for pronoun, for demonstrative, deictic, relative and WH word. What was pointed out is that demonstratives, in most cases the words which are demonstratives are also pronouns, and we have already discussed an example extensively to show the difficulty of this identification, because a word can have both pronoun and demonstrative as tag. So, the hierarchy here is that pronoun is the high level tag, and under it you have these sub levels: personal, reflexive, relative, reciprocal, WH word. Verbs were being discussed, and we spent some time discussing infinite category and gerundial category. We saw that for Hindi there is no point keeping these two subcategories, but of course, we have to keep the verb category, which is the top level, and then the main verb and auxiliary verb, which is a very universal phenomenon across all languages. Auxiliary verbs are helping verbs, and this is indicated by underscore vox. So, it is verb and then auxiliary verb. For example, hai, raha, hua, these are auxiliary verbs. Similarly, the main verb is indicated by v underscore vm, girna, jana, sona, etc. Some languages, most Dravidian languages will be able to keep these categories, these subcategories and these symbols. So, they will have another level of refinement in their tags, and this is quite desirable because this contains information. It is important to encode this information. Fine. So, I suppose it is becoming clear to you why it makes sense to have a hierarchical categorization of PoS tags. Now, we go to adjective and adverb. In the last lecture, we remarked that in Indian languages especially, adverbs do not have any special marking. Okay. So, for example, in English, the word quick can be adjective, but if you want to have an adverb from quick, you have to insert ly, quickly. So, English explicitly has this marking on the word in the form of ly, which shows that the word is an adverb. However, in Indian languages, adverbs can act as adjectives and vice versa. The primary category is adjectives. So, acha for example, is typically an adjective. वो अच्छा लड़का है, he is a good boy, but वो अच्छा खेलता है. Here acha is a manner of playing, he plays well. Therefore, this is an adverb. So, adjective adverb distinction again becomes a difficult problem in Indian languages, and there can be debate about in general, if you cannot distinguish between adverb and adjective, okay, then why retain both? The reason is historical, because adjectives and adverbs are very large content word categories, and one needs symbols on them. But when we do part of speech tagging actually on practical systems, we often find that adjective and adverb are not resolved accurately, which brings down the accuracy of the part of speech tagger. Then we have this important category called postposition, PSP, ne, ko, se, me, etc. So, ne is the ergative marker, ko is the accusative marker, se is instrumental marker, may is the locative marker. So, these are from Hindi and these are postpositions. Now, an important point of discussion here is that in Hindi postpositions are typically separate from the noun that they attach to. There is a blank space between them. But in languages like Marathi and Dravidian languages, these words, these PSPs get attached to the noun itself, and therefore, they become what are called vibhaktis and Shabdayogi Avyas. I will write these two terms which are very important for Indian language processing. Vibhakti, which are something like case markers, vibhakti, and the other is Shabdayogi Avyay. These are postpositions, but attached to nouns. Okay, attached to nouns. So, I will write it in English. Shabdayogi Avyaya. Okay. So, just to give an example, in Hindi, Ram ko bulao, let us say, Ram ko bulao, this is Ram to call. So, this ko is an accusative marker, and here it is separate from Ram, there is a blank space. But in Marathi, this will be Rama la, okay, etc. And this vibhakti, this accusative vibhakti is attached. Okay, attached. So, this means that the case marker in Marathi is attached to the word itself. Going to the case of Shabdayogi Avyay, in Hindi, table ke upar, on the table. In Marathi, it will be tevlavar. Okay. So, you can see upar is separate from table, but here var, which means on, is attached to table. Okay. So, this is the Shabdayogi Avyay. Okay. So, why this discussion? This discussion is to see what is involved in part of speech tagging of these two languages. In Hindi, if you look at the sentence here, in Hindi we will have to produce tags for table, which is noun, common noun, n underscore nn. K is a case marker, one tag for this. Upar is postposition, another tag for this. Okay. So, they will need to have two tags. But you see in Marathi, K upar are not there separately, they are not there with white spaces, they are attached with the noun itself, tevlavar. And this, what should we do for tagging here? Now, in Marathi you can have a stacking of suffixes. Okay. There can be suffix stacking, a number of tags, suffixes can get attached. So, there is this phenomenon of agglutination, stacking of suffixes, in which case it is important to identify the suffixes separately, but should we tag each suffix? This is an important question which needs careful analysis, and this needs careful analysis from the point of view of lower level processing, subsequent processing and so on. It is very clear that when there is a stacking of suffixes and a larger word is formed, we have to segment the word carefully, okay, and identify these suffixes. Anyway, so we proceed with the tags. So, postposition are ne, ko, se, etc. English on the other hand has preposition. So, with, for example, will come before noun, eat with spoon. So, with comes before noun, spoon. In Hindi it will be spoon se comes after spoon, which is postposition. Then we have this category called conjunctions, and conjunction has two subcategories, coordinator and subordinator. In coordinator we have conjuncts like and, or, but, etc., which link two main sentences. Okay. Ram sings and Sham dances. So, this and is a coordinator, and then we have subordinator, because there is a subordinated clause and a main clause. There is a main clause and the clause that it is subordinating. So, this is the CCS category, things like agar, kyonki, that means if, while, because. Okay. So, these kind of entities link a main clause with a subordinate clause, and when we do so, then we have to identify that these are sentence linkers, clause linkers, and we have two different categories of the words, CCD and CCS. Typically, it is not at all difficult to identify those categories, CC underscore CCD and CC underscore CCS. It is not at all difficult, because the words are distinct. Then we come to a category called particles. Particles are very interesting language elements. Things like to, bhi, he is an emphasis marker, indeed. Okay. Bhi is also, to is a discourse element. It has many different roles to play. Okay. For example, you could say in a discourse, you could say to aap aoge, then you will come. Okay. So, this to is something like a discourse linker, may not have any meaning in itself, but it functions in linking two different sentences. Then we have a classifier. Classifier is not required in Hindi, but in Bengali T is the classifier, which is a definite entity identifier. Interjections are exclamation symbols, are, he, o, okay, o in Hindi, aha, o in English, aha in English. These are interjections. They do not change their form, but they are there in the language to emphasize a point or say something interesting. Intensifiers are sometimes regarded as adverbs, because they qualify an adjective. So, bahut, behada, and these language particles are elements which play the role of intensifying an adjective. So, something like very, in very, intensely, and so on, which are the examples in English. Then we have negations, nahi, mat, bina, etc., which are there in Hindi, and most languages have these elements. But the interesting point here is that the negation particles sometimes are reflected through a change in the verb form, or through a change in the form of the word which is negated. So, negation identification can become a complex problem, because it may or may not be present as a separate particle. This point we will discuss as we go ahead. Then we have the quantifiers. So, thoda, bahut, kuch, ek, pehla, etc., which are quantifiers, and there are different kinds of quantifiers. General quantifiers, thoda, bahut, kuch, cardinals like ek, do, teen, ordinals like pehla, dusra. Okay. So, ordinals are first, second, cardinals are 1, 2, 3, etc. Then thoda is little, bahut is much, many. These are quantifiers again, and one does not see much difficulty in discussing them or identifying them, because their forms are very definite. And finally, you have these residuals, which are foreign words, symbols, punctuations, unknown words, echo words, which need to be given a tag in the language. Okay. So, these categories and the subcategories form the pan-Indian tag set for processing of Indian languages. We will proceed further and discuss in the next class about accuracy of PoS tagging.